6. Sun tomorrow, but then turning cloudy with some rain by the afternoon. The high tomorrow at 53. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
It's 43 at O'Hare, 44 along the lakefront. Your next news update, 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the Alpha Wealth Group, bringing the trilogy of estate, tax, and investment planning together. Visit alphawealthgroup.com for a free report.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Just to close off the math portion of the show this morning, we heard from our friend who often listens from Switzerland. He wanted to make clear that everybody understood that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It wasn't just a triangle. It has to be a right triangle. That's the Pythagorean theorem. We know this. We know this.
We have such smart listeners.
And, of course, Amy, I will leave it to you to
boy.
distinguish between the Pythagorean theorem as it pertains to a right triangle and the isosceles triangle theorem, which states what?
The isosceles triangle theorem?
Yeah. Come on, you're the pride of Hershey High School. Let's hear it.
Can you get back to me
If
on
two
that?
sides of a triangle are congruent,
Are congruent, yes.
then
You got a problem?
please see me after class, Ms. Jacobson.
I don't want homework over the weekend,
And
please.
the angles opposite of those sides are congruent. Say it. Go ahead.
If the
say it.
angles are opposite, what did you say?
Okay. All right. I think we've covered as much math as we can cover today's show. We're pleased to be joined by a friend of ours from Dickinson College, another college Amy didn't get into.
Oh, my God. I didn't even apply.
Well, or you wouldn't have got into. You're right. Excuse me. No, I'm kidding. Of course.
I went to Harvard of the Midwest. I went to Iowa.
There's nothing wrong with going to an open enrollment school like Iowa. There's no question. Crispin Sartwell is an associate professor of philosophy at Dickinson College. He's the author of Entanglements, A System of Philosophy. Crispin, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here. You're not going to give me a math quiz, are you?
No math.
Yeah, but
he's
he
a
gives
philosopher.
me math quizzes.
No.
Yeah. I don't
fair.
do no math. So.
Yes.
And apparently I don't either, Crispin.
You don't do
It's
no math.
tough, it's tough.
English is your forte. Yeah, obviously.
That's probably true, yeah.
Rural voters' pride and the left's prejudice. Is this a little bit of an Elizabeth Bennet metaphor you're using here? Are we Jane Austening the political landscape? Or is that just the headline writers that you're not responsible for?
Well, that's true. I didn't write the headline. I'm not sure what those references are, actually. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, you're a philosopher, not English lit. No math, no English lit. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, all right.
All right. Let's get to philosophy, since that's what you do at Dickinson College. We had you on the show here to academic explain to urban splainers who don't understand rural splanations. You make the argument that you continue to have, despite what happened in 2016, urban sophisticates basically arguing to rural, ex-urban and rural voters that they don't know what's in their best interest. They should listen to those urban sophisticates and follow their lead.
Yes, indeed. This has been going on for a long time, but I guess I saw a new outbreak of people kind of from, the New York Times or whatever, taking a pilgrimage to rural America to try to figure out how rural conservatives can possibly have the belief system they do when it's, supposedly against their own interests to, say, vote Republican or whatever. It's amazingly condescending. And, it has some kind of conception of rationality underneath it that is not much but self-congratulation. These people are so irrational. All that really means is we are so rational. And, I'm just tired of this whole line of argument, really.
Well, and the other thing, and it seems that What they don't understand is that their patronizing conduct is not going unnoticed by the people they're patronizing.
Yes, indeed. I mean, that's one way that, say, the Democratic Party has alienated, almost all of rural America. Just this condescending attitude where they're here to tell you what is in your interest. Whereas I'm more interested in, or I'm more sympathetic to getting people's own accounts of their own interests. For one thing, when they say that rural conservatives are voting against their own interests, they appear to mean just straight up they're against government benefits that would pay them. It's like rationality is just like, how can I get the most resources? But I think, there's other values in play. So, sort of autonomy or self-reliance, independence, like these very basic American values that, if rural voters are voting on values like that, I don't think you can, just flatly say that that's irrational. I think people get to define, at least in part, define their own interests, and these strike me as perfectly rational, actually. Like socialism might pay you something, or might tax the hell out of you too. But it might be against very many interests that you have, like just being independent of government power in any dimension, like just not having people telling you what to do, or like telling you what you can eat, for example, in exchange for food stamps or something like that.
Well, the other thing too is, this approach you're describing where DC reporters descend on rural America, like Jane Goodall going to study chimpanzees.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not so long ago that the cultural norms you see more decidedly in rural or exurban areas were the norms nationwide. I mean, the norms of hard work, responsibility, God-fearing, go to church, be a member of the Lions Club or Knights of Columbus, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is not something that just sort of popped up out of nowhere. In point of fact, what they're proposing and the way that they behave is what's popped out of relative nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe been a century-long emergence of this kind of left, but yeah, the values that they're describing as irrational are, traditional American values, and some of them you can easily, redescribe them as entirely rational by any standard. I mean, for example, if you're totally dependent on the government for resources, you're vulnerable to the government, government changing or government making a different decision. Whereas if you're independent, you control your own destiny. And that's a value, say, that derives from farming, for one thing. You know what I mean? Like, and goes back to maybe Jefferson and so on, or Ralph Waldo Emerson on self-reliance.
Yeah, right.
And so just devaluing these, like flatly not recognizing them as even in the ballpark of rationality is just, I find it amazingly offensive.
Well, you wrote in your article, too, that a poor person who isn't a strong advocate of food stamps or public housing is regarded as plainly irrational. Can you explain that further?
Yeah. I think the idea of the irrationality, like, I guess the first symptom I saw of this was Thomas Frank in 2004, his book, What's the Matter with Kansas? And so, if we're going to send you a check, you're saying that you don't support this program that's going to send you a check. Now that's just, okay, so that's supposedly economically irrational. And then we have to explain how these people got to be so irrational. And we start to describe how they've been manipulated by, I guess, right-wing talk radio, Fox News, the Koch brothers or something. And at that point, we're just disqualifying these people completely. Like they don't have, they don't even have their own opinions. They're just manipulated or whatever. Now, the left's ability to self-examine on how they're getting manipulated by their news sources and everything. That doesn't appear to be one of the issues that is being considered here.
I wonder, you essentially suggest that, again, that the left is overreaching by patronizing these voters and expecting them to fall in line. But but sort of pan out and take a broader look at the landscape. And I wonder, against the backdrop of this Pew Research study that came out earlier in the week, 12% decline in Americans identifying as Christian over the last decade, which is rather significant. Okay. And whether you think there's something else that the left is not seeing as they and their social justice cadre march on through our cultural and civic institutions. And that's to say, Christianity was definitely a target. Religion generally is a target. But what's coming and what perhaps they don't see is sort of this confederation of nationalists and populists and tribalists across a range of issues that are also not on board. And they may not be coming from a traditionally Christian perspective, but they're not on board for social justice math. They're not on board for 7-year-olds being chemically castrated and the rest of it.
Quite true. I think that is moving Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin. And, they need to take a different approach. They need to express basic respect for the values of the people that they want to vote for them. So they need to tone down the arrogance and the notion that they're going to impose a set of values, say, on rural voters. They're not going to get – Trump will win again, at least in the rural counties in Pennsylvania, if they continue in this vein.
He is Crispin Sartwell, Associate Professor of Philosophy at Dickinson College, author of Entanglements, A System of Philosophy, and I tweeted out his Wall Street Journal piece about rural voters' pride and the left's prejudice. Crispin, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it, as always, Dan, Amy.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper, hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Want your home's furnace to stay safe and reliable? And want to prevent any potential problems before they happen? At your local 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning, we recommend an annual furnace inspection and tune-up. Right now, get big savings on a furnace tune-up. Call 855-1-HOUR. Because not taking care of your furnace, that's just cold.
Your comfort is just a call away. Call 1 Hour.
Terms and conditions may apply. Call for details. Independently owned and operated. Licensed in the respective state or county.
Individual rates, coverage offerings, and savings may vary. Subject to terms and conditions.
If you run a small business, saving